Can you please welcome David to the stage? Good job, mate.
Thanks, Ken. And thank you to all of you for being here today. Now, technology is reshaping the world we live in. It's causing massive disruption across industry, government, and our society as a whole. Having said that, construction's kind of a bit meh when it comes to construction. It's just not changing as quickly. Our software is closed. It's really difficult to use, and some of it can take a whole lifetime to master. By comparison, when I started my first business back in 1992, I used a piece of accounting software, and that was just to do the books. Now, it was pretty basic. It was as bumpy as all get out. I think it was on floppy disk, but it was way ahead of what my old man used to do, which was pen and paper. Now, I recently started my next business, QSX Technologies, and I used the same brand of software. Now, the change in that software is phenomenal. It's got hundreds of apps. It's intuitive. All of the apps, they work and they fit together. If the data changes, it updates itself. So it knows where the data comes from that it operates on, and it checks in and sees what updates are there. But best of all, if I get the shits with it, I can stop paying the monthly fee, I can export the data, and I can import it into another platform. Now, in construction, we can make excuses about the complexity of it, but this is where our tech needs to get to. It needs to be intuitive, and it needs to do the job. It needs to be easy to use. And this is one of the reasons why I support Building Smart, because it's challenging vendors to do better. So what I'm going to talk about today is openBIM Deliverables. I'm going to tell you what they are, and I'm going to give you an example clause of how to specify them or how to ask for them. And then along the way, you should get a sense of what the standards are and that type of thing. So just starting with what openBIM deliverables are. Now, this is a question in itself. Can I go to this one now? I know that's confusing. The reason that it's a question in itself is that it's not something that's specified. So if you search openBIM, you're not going to find a definition from it. What you will find is something from Building Smart International, and it says openBIM is a universal approach to the collaborative design, blah, 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 but it doesn't say what they are. It describes to you what this thing is about. Now, when I look at Wiki, I come across a thing called IFC, an industry foundation class, and what it does is it starts to talk about, well, industry foundation class is the standard for openBIM. So we start to get a link between what openBIM is and what IFC is, and these things are interchangeable. It also starts to introduce this ISO thing. So there's an ISO 16739 that has something to do with it. Now, when I look at ISO 16739, what it tells me is that it's the industry foundation classes for the exchange of information in building and facilities management. Awesome. I've got something that I can work with now. So this is sort of the beginning of the question. Now, the next thing is what it is. So it looks like this. There's a graphical side to an IFC file. If you open one up, it should have a graphical side, and then inside it, it'll look like that. So it has a graphical space, and it also has data, and the data is structured in a particular way. Now, the thing that I want you, I suppose, to take away from this is that openBIM is IFC and IFC is openBIM, and they rely on an international standard. And that standard came to be in 2013, and that has also been adopted as an Australian standard in 2017. So this question of the standards aren't there to allow things to happen is answered. They are there, they're just not necessarily used or known. So when I turn to the benefits, there's one real big one, and it's the ability to use data into the future. So the Australian Archives did a study years ago now, and they found that if they were going to digitise stuff, it had to be in an open format. So all of their documents are in open documents, and it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a photograph or a text document or whatever. And that's how they use that information into the future. But the next thing is if we're exchanging information between designers and perhaps a builder using proprietary thing, proprietary files, what we're missing out on is the gold, because some of the best examples of software isn't compatible with other stuff. So stepping away from a proprietary piece of software and being able to exchange information in an open way will allow you to use the best tools that are there. And for instance, in the BIM planning space, like AstaBIM, I think is one of the best. It only operates on IFC. Other tools like Costex will operate with different things, but it's these links and the analysis that really comes from it. Now, when we look at those tools, there's a shitload of them. And there isn't any common formats between them, because I've looked, right? So I've looked for all different types of proprietary formats and something that I can use across the board. Because in my business, I'm a consumer of models, I'm not a creator of them. So I'm looking for things that will be able to link it together. And then once you start exchanging it, and this is like an old version of one of the data exchanges that Mitchell Brantman developed, it's complicated. All that's doing is moving information into Navis with cost and time shown on it. And there's a bunch of different exchanges that are happening, as compared to my accounting software, where it'll just appear. Now, one of the things I'd like you to understand is that IFC is not a standard for you. Listening to John Merchant this morning, and he talks about it's a machine-readable file. And that's what it is. It's like PDF. You don't know what a PDF, how it's made. You don't know how a CSV is made or how a TXT file is made. You know what they look like. And IFC is the same. You don't need to know the standards behind it. Those standards are actually for the vendors to implement. So if I think back to when PDF first kicked off, we didn't trust it. Right? It was around, and we would send a letter as well, because the PDF could be different. Like, I know it could be different because it was tech. The reality was that sometimes it was and sometimes it wasn't. But today, we trust PDF like all get out. And this is where IFC will lead to. It just needs to be used more and implemented properly within our software systems. So now turning to how do you ask for it. Again, I did some research on this, and what I found is that there's two main ways. One is prescriptive. This is an example out of Scandinavia, a document that bangs on for about 30 pages about how you need to produce this, what the file needs to look like, and it's very, thou shalt do this. And it's difficult, but what you would find if you were a provider is you would read that and you'd be saying, well, I don't work like that. You know, I have difficulty with that, and you wouldn't want to deliver it. The other ways are performance examples. And here I'm just looking at the Australian examples. So the first one is Queensland's draft policy. So it talks about, we'll use openBIM. Awesome, but what is that? And then Transport for New South Wales that they've just released. They've got a great digital engineering package that they've put together. But their standards talks about open data exchange protocols. NatSpec talks about existing open standards. So there's different ways of really saying the same thing. What they do need to say is that they're talking about IFC. And this is my recommendation, is that if you're going to be specifying this type of thing or asking for it, the first thing is use simple language. Keep it pretty concise. Describe what you want to receive. Don't describe how to produce it or what to do or that type of thing. And this is my go at it for openBIM Deliverables. Provide digital 3D building information models using objects and properties and relations that comply with openBIM standard ISO 16739 industry foundation class, and that's all you need to say, is essentially ask for a file that's in accordance with the standard, and then you will be able to get the right thing. So if that's the case, how do you know you've got them? Right? So you've specified it correctly, but someone provides you with this file that they may not have produced very often. How can you trust it? How do you know that this PDF is going to be the same as the Word file that it was produced from? Well, one way is third-party validation. So you can go through a way of checking it. It's bad. Well, it's not bad, but it's difficult to do. You're going to find problems, and largely they're going to be around things like coordination. and then they will also be around things like missing information. The best way to do it is to use it. So on your projects, use the IFC files on the job. This is a file that Mitchell Brantman received at tender time. This is the graphic interface at tender. Nothing. When we looked at it, I mean, one of the things we knew was that there was actually 48,000 items there. And then when the guys dug into it, they found that the problem was there was one object that was 1,500 kilometres away. So the graphical side of it was awesome. It's just that we were looking at it from the moon or somewhere. So there's simple solutions to some of these things. If you use it, you will find these things and you will have a resource that will be useful into the future. If you don't use it, it's kind of, you don't know what you'll be opening up later. In doing this, it's about challenging vendors as well. So you will find problems. One of the things Mitchell Brantman found working on the Sunny Coast University Hospital is that the IFC files from ArchiCAD had ceilings in it, but it didn't have the stuff that the estimator wanted. So for an estimator, it's pretty important to know what the suspension height is of the ceiling. Like, they knew how high it was above the floor, but they didn't know how far it was hanging from the ceiling. Now, that data was all in ArchiCAD, it's just it hadn't been mapped through in the export. Now, when this was raised by Rice Daubney, ArchiCAD fixed it, and the project benefited from it. Autodesk are doing similar things. John Merchant, who's here, Autodesk identified some problems on major infrastructure projects in France and in the Netherlands, and they engaged John to solve them, and he pretty much punched it out in 2 weeks, and those things were available and then being able to use for other people who use that software down the track. So the thing here is use it, identify problems, report them back to our vendors the same way as we did with PDF and everything else, and we'll start to get the solutions. So my final words, I hope I've given you a sense of what openBIM deliverables are, because they will drive better analysis of your projects. If you're able to use more tools to analyse your projects more deeply, you will get better results. And as well as that, you will have far more efficient information exchanges between different people, and you will be able to store it. All you need to do is ask for IFC or openBIM. And then when you do that, use simple words and ensure that it's used during the design and construction, and you'll have something that's useful into the future. Thank you.